Good afternoon to everybody who's joined and everyone who's come along. My name is Barry. I'm the head of marketing here at Planet IT. So a big welcome to you all to this roundtable, all about facing and overcoming IT challenges in education. We all face challenges in our professional careers, but I think we can all agree that those which you face as specialists in education are unique compared to the obstacles that I will face in my career. That's why we decided to host this as a roundtable discussion rather than a standard webinar. We wanted you to be able to both hear and contribute to a conversation with your peers and find out how everybody has overcome their own obstacles in IT in the education sector. So before I hand over to the panel, and just a little housekeeping to make sure it all goes smoothly. So first things first, we are recording this session so that it's available should any of you wish to recap anything that you may have missed while live. I'll ask you now to put yourselves on mute. I know a lot of you have already. We want to all clearly hear what everybody is saying, the points being made, and would rather not hear anybody eating their lunch or the kids playing in the background or anything like that. But saying that, this is a roundtable. It's not a presentation. So please feel free to ask your questions or to pitch in with our four panelists. If you have any questions or comments about something the panelists are discussing at the time, and as this is over Teams, I will ask you to put your hand up. But here, different to a classroom, we'll click on the raise your hand icon at the top or the bottom of your window, depending how you have Teams set up. Once your hand is raised, James will see it and he'll ask you to come off mute and make your point. If you would like to raise another topic, simply drop a message in the chat and we'll discuss that topic shortly. And finally, cameras. Our panel will of course have theirs on. You are more than welcome to have yours on or off, however you feel most comfortable. But it would be nice to see everybody's faces while they're speaking. Okay, that's all the housekeeping done for me, short and sweet. It's the last you'll hear from me today. So I'm going to pass you over to James now, who most of you already know, and he'll introduce the rest of today's panel. James.
Thanks for that, Barry. Hi, everyone. So yeah, hello and welcome to this, which is our May 2021 virtual roundtable event. We obviously held one of these in 2018 and 2019, and they were in person. This was a bit different now. So it's good that you could all join us for this distanced event. While I'd love to be welcoming you to the Planet office or some swanky hotel, we'll have to make do with this for the time being. And we look forward to the next event, hopefully being in person. So for today, we actually have invited some, guest speakers, and they're kind of, really well placed to talk to you today about the challenges of delivering IT in education. Needless to say, IT and education are really close to my heart and embedded in the roots of who I am and my career. So for those of you who don't know, I am James Dell. I'm head of technical architecture at Planet IT. I've not always been this side of the fence though. So for over 10 years, I worked in educational and medical settings providing IT services. So I know firsthand the challenges that all of us have faced and will face dealing with IT in education. So that's enough about me. So let me introduce the panel that we have today and give you a little flavour of who they are. So to start me off, we've got Dave Higgs, who is Security and Services Experience Centre Lead for Imperial College London. So Dave, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Higgs. My background very much for the last 15 years has been IT, working my way from infrastructure, working my way from switches, wireless, etc., going up to more of the management and cybersecurity role. Now, last year I was with Harlow College as their IT and cybersecurity manager, and more recently I have moved to Imperial College London, where I look after their they call it the Security and Service Experience Centre. It's best way of thinking of it is a SOC and a NOC team. So basically our job is to eyes on glass, monitor the estate. And as you can imagine, Imperial College is immense. So it's quite an undertaking. On top of that, I do consultancy work in the private sector. So I have very good knowledge of both that private sector and public sector and the challenges they face. They're not too different, especially nowadays with the cybersecurity and the risks we all face. So it's yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks for that, Dave. Really appreciate that. So alongside Dave, we've got Mike Pearce, who is ICT Network Manager for St Cuthbert's Roman Catholic Academy Trust. Enough words in there. Mike, I know you have an interesting background before you came into IT and education, so let's have a flavour of who you are and about your history.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I've had quite a long career in IT. I started in the lowly ranks of first level support in a help desk, what seems like a lifetime ago now, and kind of moved up through all the various roles in IT. So I've done system administration, spent quite a lot of time in the corporate sector with some really big multinational companies. Stayed in was part of a very big core competence centre for Europe, doing development where we really focused around process improvement through companies, and then kind of found myself moving into education, which was quite an eye opener coming from a corporate environment. So that's where we are now. Network manager currently for St Cuthbert's Roman Catholic Academy Trust, which is a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, so we're one of the leading schools in the Northern Hemisphere. We're in the top 100 schools in the country. We also have world-class status. So that's where we are now.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that. So, and then last and by no means least, we've got Graham Rivers, who is ICT Network Manager for Malta Boys Prep School, set in the lovely Oxfordshire countryside, in which today would be quite nice to be sat out there rather than indoors. But anyway, Graham, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, been at Malta Prep School for 16 years. It's been the only education establishment I've been in. I was industry before then. Similar to Mike, I've been in IT a long time, over 30 years. Started out sort of like warehouse based, and it was I first got introduced to it where warehouses first started to go from like old paperwork T cards onto computer systems, and I started out actually working on an IBM mainframe. What I did mostly was actually just sort of learn what that system was doing and then passing on that training. I've dabbled in lots of things. I got into software development. I was programming for 9 years at like various different companies. I made my move to education in 2004 at Malta Prep School. It was when they was first realizing that IT was going to grow in the school. So the first person like full-time IT there. And it's really funny because I feel like where I started at sort of like learning things and then passing on that training to other people, I feel like I'm doing quite similar things now. So yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell, really.
Thanks, Graham. That's really good to hear. So now we've got the introductions out of the way. I'm going to jump into the hard questions. Say hard questions, they're not going to be that hard. So when I was thinking about this, what I really wanted to start with was where the basis for today's event came from, which Barry touched on at the top, which is about challenges. We've all come across challenges, and we all know that in education, IT challenges are massively magnified because they're always done in shorter time frames, with less money, with more focus on essentially getting the right results. So what I'm going to ask my panel now is, what is your greatest challenge in your IT educational background, and how did you overcome it? So Graham, I'm coming to you first for that. So talk me through your greatest IT challenge and how you overcame it.
Right, for me, I felt the greatest is the one-to-one devices with students. Obviously, I've gone through a lot of changes at Malta School with virtually nothing there when I arrived in 2004. So not just like the teaching side of things, obviously lots of changes in that area as well. But for me, the real biggie has been the one-to-one. We are actually adding this year our year 3s onto one-to-one iPads. I think that in itself is a challenge. That's going to push us just over 500 iPads. The real challenges, I think, is obviously the control of so many iPads, so many children. And for me, I think the breakthrough points, without a doubt, is the arrival of MDMs. Before that, trying to start. So I sort of introduced iPads would be 9 years ago. So you're talking pretty much before MDMs arrived, and I was sort of like just doing everything in-house with Apple Configurator. Really difficult, and that was with like 20 odd iPads. Like I say, this summer, adding in our year 3, we're going to be exceeding 500. I think finding the right combination of an MDM is the real key, and as hard as you try, I don't think you'll find one that does everything that you want. I've visited other schools. I've seen things where it makes a massive difference because one school does something slightly different to another. We're currently on our 4th MDM, which we're now using Microsoft Intune. And that's our 4th MDM in 9 years. So I think that speaks volumes. And I would put that down to never stopping to strive and find like the ultimate solution. And sometimes I think it is just really a case of think outside the box sometimes. When I first thought about Microsoft Intune, so Microsoft controlling Apple devices, I was like, really? I was pleasantly surprised. So yeah, that's definitely been our biggest challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge as well. What's really been highlighted to me this last 18 months, obviously with the arrival of COVID and then so much home learning, has taken it to another level of trying to control all those iPads when they go away from site. It's opened up another level, which I'm sure David, being the security side of things, can probably shed some further sort of knowledge and information on that.
So on that, Graham, I suppose, how critical was the wireless and the network infrastructure for delivering one-to-ones? Has that been kind of one of the things that was a big challenge for you? Because obviously 9 years ago, Wi-Fi was completely different to where it is today. And
absolutely, and that's, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, James, because I should have mentioned anyway what a fundamental thing that is, obviously. So obviously I started out, I put literally like home Wi-Fi access points around the school, used to walk around with a laptop to try and find dead spots, but I managed that for 7 years. Obviously, as then your mobile devices really started to take off on the demand on Wi-Fi, so the first, if you like, professional setup we had put in was Maru. That's still running, and as you well know, James, we're just on the transition now to go to what are the latest technologies. But yeah, without that, and that in itself has been challenging. That said, when the Maru stuff went in, that transformed what we were able to do.
Yeah, definitely, it's a big change, isn't it? Because you think from where you started, you had essentially ABG, old-fashioned Wi-Fi when these devices first launched, and then some of the iPads had N as they started to creep in. And your Wi-Fi now, we're talking about Wi-Fi 6, and all the technologies that come with that. It's a big gap, and obviously the infrastructure you need to support that is ultimately pretty massive as well. So it's good to hear. I suppose another question I wanted to ask you, which is maybe more of a theoretical question, and maybe something for your counterpart in the school, is, do you still think the one-to-one devices in classrooms are the future of digital learning? Because obviously for a long time it was saying that everyone was like, one-to-one devices are going to be everything, but a lot of schools have come away from that. They've gone, oh well, we still do shared devices, we still do classroom-based stuff. So do you think one-to-one is still the way that it's going to go, or do you think that might change in the future?
No, do you know what? I could see that absolutely changing in the future, and that's a great question, because I've got real mixed feelings. I do get involved in the academic side like a little bit, and it is only a little bit. I am obviously, without a doubt, mostly to like behind the scenes, really, all the technical side. But do you know what? I see a lot of what goes on in the classrooms and everything, and I sometimes think, is technology getting a little bit too much in the classroom. And of course, seeing all of the one devices going in, and I suppose here's a real eye opener, or certainly was for me. Certainly over the last couple of years, when I have like a member of staff say to me, because their whiteboard has failed, I can't teach.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa. So yeah, that's a great question, and I've got very mixed feelings over that. I think a lot of what you see, it's absolutely fantastic, but I do sometimes think, is it a little bit too much?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, Graham. I'm going to move on and pose the same question to Mike now. So, Mike, essentially the same question. So, what's your greatest challenge been in your educational IT background, and how did you overcome it?
I think anybody who works in education will kind of understand my point when I say every day is a challenge working in education, and certainly when it comes around technologies and IT. So we kind of, when I joined the trust, it was just a secondary school. We weren't an academy. We didn't have the academy status. So I came in just after Building Schools for Futures programme in end of 2012, 2013. So they had a significant investment in IT. The problem for me, I guess coming from a corporate environment into education, was we had lots of systems that did wonderful things, but they were kind of old before they went in because of the way that the whole process worked with BSF. A lot of the kit specifications, by the time they actually got installed, some of them were actually out of date on the day of installation. So we was an RM school as well. We weren't supported fully by RM because we have our own on-premises IT team. So the systems that they've put in place, when you come from like that corporate background where things have to be efficient and work well, just as an example, build times for your kit, your desktops, for your laptops, it was like 4.5 hour build times. And it's just like, well, how can that happen when you've got a completely new environment? So I guess the initial challenges were around kind of getting the best out of what we had, and then also then kind of recognizing that industry standard kit should be able to work in an educational setting. And that's kind of the model that we've moved into, kind of following the project of 2019. I don't know if you wanted me to cover that at this point, James.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead and talk about that. Yeah.
We kind of we went through the pain of BSF, and we kind of finally got to the end of the life cycle for the kit, and we needed to really start thinking then about, well, what does IT look like in the future, and what do we want to enable our students to do within the school? Do we want education specific applications for them to use, or do we actually want to set them up for their further learning and then eventually going on into the workplace with some real solid foundations that they pick up from the school? So we embarked on a project, finally got round to doing a project 2019, working with Planet IT. It went out to national tendering. It was around a £500,000 project where we actually just started again, all with enterprise level kit. So we've got enterprise class Wi-Fi, server infrastructure. We're like hybrid cloud, so we've got kind of the best of both worlds. What we was able to put into the cloud at the time, we have done, and what we wanted to retain on site, such things like your MIS systems, we retained on site. So we've gone from what seemed like an overly complicated environment to a very simplistic one that's industry standards, going to set us up for the future. Well into the future, we went through a very ambitious program of, at that point we was a secondary school and 7 primary schools. So it's centrally managed from the secondary school, and we provide all services from the centrally managed service. And working with some really good partners, we managed to achieve that in 5 weeks, which was always going to be an ambitious project, but we managed to get there and we managed to achieve it. So think the challenge now is not just around kind of having that environment in place, but it's how we then now use all these wonderful systems that we've got and actually get them embedded into teaching.
I suppose a couple of questions on that then. So obviously you moved away from what was an RM CC4 system. Was that a big decision? Because I know that on this call there's going to be a few people that probably are still on CC4 networks, and ultimately, was it worth it?
Absolutely, it was the best thing we ever did. We'd already kind of made steps towards not using an RM architecture before we embarked on the project. So we'd already started using things like MDT for deployment for staff, because it was just so much more efficient being able to have a device built in like 10-15 minutes as opposed to waiting 4.5 hours on an RM network for your devices to be configured. So, you know, it's absolutely been worth it. The opportunity that it's given us within the trust to really centralise all the services and provide much better facilities for our primary schools that have been massively underinvested for kind of the last decade. Most of our primary schools didn't have IT facilities on site. They maybe had a suite of computers that were 20 years plus old. No real robust access to Wi-Fi within the school. All of our schools, it's full Wi-Fi coverage right across every single school. No access to anything really. We was a little bit better off at St Mary's College, but the things that it's allowed us to put in place, like bring your own device schemes for, we have a sixth form college here as well. All the advantages of having an efficient and robust network and services, it has just allowed us to really add value to the schools in what they're doing. Definitely.
I suppose the final question obviously would be, we did it in 5 weeks. You know, we've talked to people that have been trying to do the opposite way around, which is trying to do it slowly over several years. Do you think doing it in 5 weeks was the right time, or do you think if you had the chance to do it again, you'd take longer? What's your take on that? Because obviously it was quite an intense project, to say the least.
I think it was always going to be overly ambitious to do it in 5 weeks. I think the original plan that we had was to do the secondary school in one summer holiday, and then bring the primaries online the following year. But as everybody knows, working in education, it's a slow burn to get anything passed through finance, get the adoption from your senior team, and it kind of forced our hand to some respect, going from Windows 7 to 10. We didn't want to leave ourselves in a vulnerable situation for another 12 months, so we kind of just went, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it in 5 weeks. And yeah, a little bit overly ambitious, and it was hard work. We did a lot of hours with a very small team. But yeah, I think it was worth it. Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that. So now I'm going to go in and put on my tinfoil hat, and we're going to go across to Dave, and we're going to ask the same question. So about your greatest IT challenges and how did you overcome them? Obviously, being security focused, I'm assuming we're all going to be terrified in the next 5 minutes. So I'll hand over to you.
Oh, I've only got 5 minutes. I thought so. I've got 35 minutes according to my clock. So, well, yeah, I mean, obviously my background is very much security. My kind of the time before official role of it has been ethical hacking. That's where I kind of started from, and I wanted to emphasize the ethical side. That kind of sparked my interest into what was out there. And then obviously from that, it was trying to get the education establishment I was working at the time to understand how vulnerable we were. And that, to me, is one of the biggest problems that public sector face. Actually, I'd probably argue to say industry globally face cybersecurity. No one quite grasps the impact that it's having on us. We, I'd probably say, what, 6, 7, 8 years ago was when I really started to spearhead the work where I was to try and get them to understand where we were. And I think problem we've got in the public sector is some organisations, I won't say all, because I especially say where I'm at the moment, they very much take it seriously. They kind of see hacking and threat actors as a Hollywood thing. It's one of those things that don't really affect us until you come in the morning and you go, oh bother, we can't access our files, we think we've been hacked, and then it becomes real. And I think that's the danger a lot of public sectors slip into. They kind of think it won't happen to them until it does. Like I said, cybersecurity is a minefield. I could easily spend an hour going through what there is and what we need to do. I think what I will say is the DFE have definitely done us all a favour. I know a lot of you will disagree with this one, by forcing our hands with Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus that we've got to obtain before July 2022. It's kind of helped us in IT with that, you know, the CFO conversation, trying to explain to the financial side of the organisation that we need to spend money on new switches, new computers, taking security seriously, because if we don't, we get reduced funding. Now, if you've got an organisation that works off a set 5 million a year and you're very tight to that 5 million, and all of a sudden DFE goes, well, you didn't meet your cyber essentials, so therefore we're going to take $1 million off, the impact's immense for an organisation. So one thing we found was that it was very much when I got all my certifications a few years ago and moved into the role of cybersecurity manager, it was very much road mapping where we are and what the possible problems could come from. And then luckily enough, 3 years ago, DFE turned around and went, Cyber Essentials is a must. Cyber Essentials Plus is going to be a must. Now they're talking about the ISO accreditation that might slip in as well. So to me, I mean, like I said, James, I could go on all day about this.
So I suppose some of the questions I wanted to push you on earlier. So how did the management of the college respond to the kind of your needs when you're like, you know, cybersecurity is massively important? Because I've been in those meetings and you often get the CFO or even the principal go, yeah, it's money we don't want to spend. So did you have that same conversation, or did you find a different way to take that forward and really overcome that challenge?
I'll be honest, because like I said, I come from that ethical, emphasis on that background. Mine was very much proof of concept. Now, I probably 8 years ago, when I was first concerned about some of the problems we had, I started the conversations with, I need money. Now, we all know, you go to finance and say, I need money. We all know how that conversation is going to end up. So the new tact on it was pretty much explaining to them where we are, saying to them, look, this is the problem we've got. This is how easy it was for me to get into the network, and this is how much it's going to be to plug the hole. And when you actually put it nice, I wouldn't say nice and easy for them or clear to them. I'm not trying to you know, downplay their role here, but they need it shown to them. This is the risk. This is how much it's going to cost, and it will be exploited. I mean, we've all got those problems on our network. Half the time, it's, you know, it could boil down to staffing, not having the staffing in the team to find those vulnerabilities in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. No, I appreciate that. I think that's you're spot on with that. I think one of the things that I'm going to ask you now, which you're going to laugh at, is so I think I've heard banded around from a few IT managers in education is, well, cybersecurity in education poses different risks to the real world, so we haven't got to worry about it. Do you see that being the case, or do you think actually all businesses are the same? And
no, I got the same thing. So it's like I think the exact argument was to me was, if you was to give a threat actor Barclays Bank or our college, what one are they going to pick? Unfortunately, that's not how they work. That's not how threat actors work. They're very organised nowadays. I mean, I've got my foot in the door in quite a few groups, and you get to learn quite a lot about how it's organised. And trust me, it's very organised. I mean, we all know about DarkSide taking down the pipeline in America. Very organised. They have a help desk to take ransomware requests. They will actually talk you through buying Bitcoin to do it. So yeah, it's very much I feel like I'm going off tangent a bit, James.
no, it's fine. I suppose the final piece I want to ask you on this really is, if you were to coming greenfield, from scratch, you're going to an educational organisation, they've got no cybersecurity, is like, it's not been done. Where would you start? Where would be your touch points you'd start, and how would you look to get that from nowhere to a point where you'd at least be able to sleep at night?
Yeah, again, one of the primary things of the cyber essentials that the government are really pushing with the help of the NCSC here is vulnerability assessments, vulnerability scans. It's an initial step of finding out where your holes are on the network, and you have to plug them first. I mean, that's where threat actors will, like I was going to go on the previous question, is exactly that. They'll get a block of IPs. They'll just sit there scanning through them. And to be honest, half of their computers are AWS environments, just sitting there polling IP addresses. And then they'll get one with a vulnerability. And then that's it. That's their way in. Not that long ago, I did some work with an organisation who they were locked down. They were really locked down. They were convinced they were locked down. We found a HP ILO port that was open to the web on default credentials. It's that sort of thing. They're little ways in. The vulnerability assessment as a starting point brings up all kinds of things. I'm trying to fit one just the other week. An FTP server was exposed to the internet. You've got to look at your boundary first and then move in. I think the problem we start finding is, cybersecurity is new to us. We're kind of like we're playing catch up, but our kids are learning it now. Yeah, it's like a video game to some of them. So it's kind of got to be on it because the younger, smarter ones are coming up.
And it's the tiniest gaps, isn't it? Like you said about the vulnerability scanning, it's those tiny gaps. Like there was the one the other week around the iDRAC for vulnerability for on certain Dell systems, and it was that one exploit. But if that's an exploit running on your virtual host, well then suddenly your virtual host is at risk, and then your entire infrastructure is at risk. And it's that scale that people don't sometimes understand, that you've got the smallest chink in your armor, then the rest of your armor falls apart pretty quickly.
Well, in the last, what are we on now? Like in the last 36 hours, VMware have announced that they've got a critical 9.8 vulnerability on their VMware vCenter environment. It's a health check area on port 443. If exploited, that's it. Privilege escalation, and away you go. It's those little things that companies are unaware of that, believe it or not, quite a few of our students are tracking these sites. They're tracking these vulnerabilities, and they will know about them before we do.
Yeah, and they're not stupid either. That's the problem, isn't it? Thank you for that, Dave. Really appreciate it. So I suppose now, if anyone who asked on the call wanted to ask any questions around what we've just talked about to the panel, feel free to put your hands up, and we'll hand over to you to ask your questions. Obviously, if not, we'll keep moving. But obviously, this is for you guys. It's a round table. If we're in a room, it's harder to, we can see everyone if you want to sort of jump in. But feel free to ask questions if you want to ask questions of the panel. Mike, I see you've got your hand up. Feel free to ask away. You got to unmute yourself. That's always the worst bit on Teams. Still not unmuted. Oh, 1 second. Let's see if we can help you on that. You still are. That's better. You're not on mute now, but I don't know if I can hear you still. No. I still can't hear you, Mike. This is technical issues 101.
Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh God. My missus has been looking for that button for years. Going back to the discussion that Graham started and with Michael, I just wondered what other panelists' views were on BYOD, because we've just gone at the end of COVID, we went to BYOD for our years 5 to 12. What are your views on that regarding students bringing their own devices, or perhaps best giving people a school provided device?
Yeah, definitely. Dave, Mike, whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
Yeah, I think it raises a really interesting point, because everybody's got tight budgets. We have what I think is a large estate. It might not be in comparison to some other bigger trusts, but we have an estate of about 800 student laptops in the secondary school, and we've got over 2,000 students. So we don't need to be mathematicians to know that not everybody's going to be able to use a laptop today. So kind of with bring your own devices, we introduced that in sixth form, because they're of an age where they need kit that works, they need kit that's fast, and it gives them the flexibility around working at home. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us to allow them that facility. We have the infrastructure to be able to accommodate more devices. We have the security in place to ensure that we aren't compromising ourselves in any way, and it just gives them a lot more freedom when they're coming to school, certainly in sixth form. And it's a scheme that I would like to see extended throughout all of the school from year 7 upwards. We have a real problem, I think, within education. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but certainly at St Cuthbert's, computing isn't on the curriculum. So from year 7, how are you teaching your students how to use computers that don't have the basic skills, and even to use a username and password, because we live in a world now where everything's touch screen, touchpad, facial recognition, and obviously we can't accommodate those kinds of services everywhere else. So I think it's a really interesting question, and one that I would encourage to get those schemes in place. Give the students the ability to take learning home with them. I think it can only add value to what they're doing, especially when obviously things like digital transformation, there's a massive buzz at the minute around that, and extending learning beyond the classroom. So I think it can only be a good thing.
Dave, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think, I mean, echoing what Michael said, but you've got to have that user experience piece in your mind the whole time. You may be letting them use their own equipment because some of these kids are very rich mummy and daddies that are going to buy them better kit than they have access to at the college or at the school. But it's that user experience piece. How are you going to support them with their equipment? How are you going to be able to facilitate the software that they need to learn on? Not to mention, there's the whole security piece of how are you securing your network from them, and how are you putting their mind at rest that their security isn't affected by joining your network. I mean, as you can tell, I'm very much on the security side here. I came from managing or being head of IT and understanding exactly the problem that you're talking about. How do we engage with the students and let them use their own kit? But on the flip side, it's a hard road to go back on once you go down it. So it has to be thoroughly thought out first. And it's that, believe it or not, I think the key thing is user experience. What are they going to get that's going to be better than using your kit? Because you could let them use a £2,000 MacBook, but if you've locked them down and you say, oh, sorry, we're not licensed to let you have that software on your personal kit, that user experience rapidly starts going downhill. So it's, it's a big conversation piece. You could spend an hour talking about that alone.
Well, to jump onto what Dave just said, obviously in my previous role, I was in an organisation that had done one-to-one iPads, very similar time to when Graham's talking about originally starting this. And I went back about 3 years after I'd left, and they completely got rid of the program. So they did it with 7, 8, and 9, and then they decided it just didn't work, and they scrapped it because they found that the parents were struggling with the continuous, oh, well, you need a new app for this new lesson, we're going to have to charge you more, and this rolling cost. I think the only way it really works is if the organization takes quite a bit of the hit for the cost, and ultimately that then changes the model. And I know that some places that have done it really well, they do like a 50-50 commitment between parents and the actual organization itself, and essentially there's an agreement there as to how much is whose responsibility, because otherwise you've got insurance problems, you've got software licensing problems, and it snowballs into something that is very difficult to manage. But from a teaching and learning point of view, it's amazing to be able to go to a student, grab your device, get it out and start learning, versus okay, go, let's see when an IT room is available. It's a completely different world.
Yeah, I mean, I can add some to that. Obviously, again, during this last 18 months with the pandemic and lots of our devices obviously going home, we had some real, you could say, like, mixed feelings. We did have a few issues with parents with devices going home, because obviously we're iPads, so where it's profile pushed, you've got a certain amount of control. And like I mentioned when I was talking about like trying all these different MDMs, trying to find that ultimate, I don't think there really is one. So there's just some things you can't control. And yeah, we had some predicaments over the last 18 months where we had parents then complaining to the school because their boys were able to access things when they took them home and joined to their home Wi-Fi. I know I've mentioned to you, James, recently that I've just started looking at like cloud-based security to try to, if you like, cater for stuff being off-site more. Pretty much up until the pandemic, yeah, all of our devices, the rules were they weren't allowed to leave site. That's certainly made things a lot easier for us to control. So yeah, a big eye-opener this last 18 months.
Right. Mike, back to you to see if your mute works this time.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge that we're facing mainly is the student devices that are brought in. Quite often, they're parent cast-offs. So we're seeing a lot of older technology coming in that's probably not as good as we can provide in the school. And then with the student devices, like Graham, it's the challenge of they own the device. How much control can you have over that? Can you install clients that will start to restrict where they go? Do most people cover that in policies?
Yeah, so it's a 50-50 job, isn't it? So some of it's going to be a written policy. Microsoft Intune, as Graham's mentioned, can solve some of those problems because you can do conditional based application of some of the rules. So you can say, you know, okay, well, whilst they're in the organization or on your IP schema, they get a certain set of rules. But again, if they've got naff old kit, you know, they come in with iPad minis from 2008, you're going to struggle to do anything to them because they're not supported by a lot of the platforms. So it's definitely a bit of a balancing act there. Sorry, Dave, I've seen you put your hand back up.
No, I'm just going to guess what I'm going to talk about.
Security.
No, this old kit, you're bang on the money. The problem is with this old kit is, again, you're putting your network at risk. You're letting this old kit come on your network. There are policies that a lot of public sector apply to BYOD saying, you know, by joining our network, you agree that you have an antivirus program on your device that is up to date. You are running the latest OS. Again, it's that how strong as your network is as strong as your weakest link. And if you've got students coming in with a Mac with Maverick running on it, my life, you know, it becomes difficult. And like it's not impossible. It can be managed. You can create yourself a walled garden on your wireless network, and then your network is protected, and all you're pretty much providing them with a DHCP and DNS and out. But the problems, I agree. Yeah, I kind of err towards people having too much money, but yes, like you say, some people who get the parents cast-offs. Yeah, no, I feel the pain on that one. Yeah.
Mr. Pierce, you've got your hand back up again.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate again from what you just said. We do control it via policy, so we provide students with what we see as a minimum specification. So it has to be a minimum operating system. Things like Dave's just already mentioned about security and having antiviral programs installed on the devices. We can provide that as an organisation because of what we have with Sophos, with our firewalls that do end user software for free that we was able to give to our students during lockdown as well. And then other applications like we're an Office 365 school or Microsoft 365 school, so things like having applications on the personal devices is no longer a problem because of the way that we license our products allows them to install it on up to 5 different devices, whether that's a mobile device or a Mac, a laptop. And yeah, I think it's exactly what David just said. It's making sure that your infrastructure is secure to start with, and then if they're bringing their own devices in, there's lots of things that we can do to secure their devices as well. So yeah, just mainly through the policies that and the conditions that you've got within your environment.
Definitely. Perfect. I'm going to move things on a little bit now, if that's all right. So let's flip things around a little bit. So obviously we all know as educational providers, the education providers can be very slow to adapt to technology, and it often requires you as IT leaders to be in a position of greater foresight of what's coming, to know what road bumps you're going to have to try and dodge around because the organization hasn't adapted quick enough. So as IT leaders and organizations, what IT trends do you think will change the way that IT works in your organisation? So, I suppose, Mike, to come to you first. Do you see anything down the road that's going to massively change the way that you guys are working, or anything that you're keeping an eye on at the moment?
I think it's a really difficult thing to say, but I think the pandemic has actually done wonders for IT and education. It's brought us right back to the forefront, because we're no longer those guys who sit in a darkened office and make things work. We're right at the forefront of everybody's thoughts now, even more so since we've come back. So we're right back up on the agenda. There's lots of appetite now to get technology in a classroom and to extend learning beyond the classroom. So I think it's a massive opportunity for us. I think where the barriers were before, like you just said, James, in terms of speed of progress, it's always a slow burn in education to try and get anything through senior leadership, through financing, to get adoption. And I don't think those barriers are going to be there anymore as much, because when you're telling your senior leaders things like cybersecurity is massive at the moment from the DFE guidance that's come out. So when you're telling them that you need to spend money, we've now got the endorsement, if you like, from the DFE saying, well, yeah, it's a priority. You have to do it. So I don't think some of the barriers are going to be there anymore. I think the challenges certainly are going to be around cybersecurity over the next few years. You know yourself, James, we've seen that right from 2019 onwards, even up to last year. We were dealing with incidents, whether they were being generated internally, external attacks, and it's all about just having those things in place that you need to do to mitigate those circumstances and being able to keep your operations running. We're a 365-day a year, 24/7 industry, even in education. So I think they're the main challenges that are definitely going to come up.
Definitely. Thanks, Mike, for that. So, Graham, do you see any IT trends? Because obviously you're in a slightly different sector to some of the other guys, because you're in the in the private schooling sector, and you've got, obviously it's a boys' school as well. Do you see any kind of IT trends that are going to change the way that you're working in as an organisation?
If I'm honest, no. But picking up certainly on a few comments there that Mike said. So, for instance, I can remember I've been sitting down for several years now with senior management, talking about, you'll all remember when VLEs were becoming the rage, and everybody talked about, oh, you must have a VLE in case the school had to shut for some reason. Never once did I really see what came coming, and it took us by surprise a bit, and it shook us a bit as well. But certainly, reiterating what Mike said, what I've learned over the last 18 months is probably massive compared to my last 16 years. Yeah, I think it has changed things. It has changed things a lot. And I think the security is the big one. Again, we're all aware of the focus of ransomware on education. Yeah, I don't really see anything changing that much. No. Other than, if you like, it's, I suppose, just how we do things.
Definitely. I think that's why I asked the question, Graham, because I think, like, if we talked 5 years ago, there was so many things that were coming. So, we had the whole iPad thing was kicking off. We had the Windows 10 was going to massively change how Windows works. We had the Wi-Fi technology was changing every few months. It suddenly was this snowball, but actually we've reached our point now where we're kind of at the tip now, and it is a case of, well, the things that are going to get better are only going to be marginal improvements, and that's maybe why it was a bit of a difficult question to pose on purpose. So no, I appreciate that, Graham. And I suppose, coming to you, Dave, I think you can answer everyone's cybersecurity questions. No, I'm joking. So I'm assuming for you that's where the biggest risk and the biggest trends come from, is the ever-changing threat actors, or have you got a different take on that?
I was going to talk about keyboards and mice. I was
cool,
going to
perfect.
change up completely, throw a right curveball in there. No, to be honest, what we've found is social engineering is actually one that's snowballed, because security is getting better. Firewalls are getting virtually impenetrable now if they're set up correctly. The amount of layers you have to jump through. So threat actors, they have to think smarter. They have to think, how can I get in with minimal effort? You think it's a money game for them at the end of the day. We've seen a massive rise in social engineering. You take the Twitter hack, for example, the 40-odd million that they made just by doing social engineering. The hackers phoned up the support line at Twitter and managed to trick them into giving access. That's the sort of thing. And that's Twitter's campaign. I know for a fact their internal security campaign is very strong, and yet they managed to fool them into letting them onto the network. We've got that and the Internet of Things. Now, that is exploding. HP recently have announced that they've got switches that are going to have 20 kilowatt power supplies in them, because their PoE are going to start powering lighting. Now, I've seen it in action, and their LED lighting strips are actually fed via Ethernet straight into the switch. So the days of running premise wiring everywhere will be gone. It'll all be power over Ethernet. A great idea, I must admit. It is a fantastic idea, but it just puts all that emphasis back on cybersecurity again.
Yeah.
If you manage to attack that switch, you lose your lighting as well, and it starts snowballing. You've got your heating, you've got your aircon units, you've got your alarm system. So the Internet of Things I can see rapidly becoming a problem, because all these small vendors that create these small little devices and these small little sensors, they don't support the firmware for very long.
No.
And before you know it, that firmware's been shelved, they've moved on to a new product, there's now a vulnerability in that old one. Who's going to patch it? So we think about computers and virtual environments and firewalls, but really that little sensor on your window that's sensing the lux level to control the lighting, that could be your weak link.
And that's it with IoT, though, isn't it? It's amazing what IoT could do, because I've seen like a use case in education where you say, well, if you put every projector and everything on an IoT device, so we know when the classroom's empty, so therefore the projector gets turned off, the lighting gets shut down, the heating gets changed.
Your surface of attack.
Yeah,
it's
it literally,
bigger. Yeah.
Literally, what do you do? I overheated the building, I turned the lights off, and I locked the doors. I can't leave. That's a scary kind of cyber attack we don't want to be facing. And then you are getting into the kind of sci-fi stuff we don't want to be talking about. No, I appreciate that. I suppose, do any of you guys see your organizations moving over to like cloud computing in a big way in the next few years, in terms of cloud computing is a horrible big term, but I mean like moving your infrastructure off premise, because that's something that on legacy, big business loves to do that because it's lower cost. But education, obviously, it's always, or we can sweat an asset for 14 years if we want to. So do you think that there's going to be that push in your organizations?
Yeah, on that one. So we're moving on to more and more Chromebooks. We started them just in the learning support department. They just found a really good use for them with some of the special needs things that they do. And honestly, James, if somebody asked me again, sort of like not that long ago, 3 to 5 years ago, that sort of question, I'd have been like, nah, no chance. The speed that cloud-based systems have come on, I mean, it's just out of sight. And I could absolutely see it. Do you know what? In the last 6 months, I've had people talk to me about what laptop should I buy? This is what I want to do. And I've said, well, why don't you consider a Chromebook? Considerably cheaper. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in our school quite soon.
Definitely. David, so you put your hand up. What's your thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, we've seen AWS getting very aggressive with their pricing recently. I've seen one, I know 2 universities straight off the top of my head that are very much looking towards moving that end user compute into the cloud environment and pretty much giving students access straight into the cloud. It ticks so many boxes. You don't have to worry about that on-prem hardware and that return on investment piece, and all of that kind of changes. I mean, obviously you've still got the expense of the ongoing licensing, but yeah, very much so. I see it going. I think again, it's the pandemic. It's caused this new way of thinking. It's caused this, why pull all those students in and all that footfall into the building, all that extra expense when we can easily support
Put it in the cloud,
yeah.
Yeah, Mike, what about you? What about yourself? Because obviously you guys did a massive investment in 2019. But do you think that's going to force a hybrid approach?
I mean, it was a massive consideration when we embarked on that project 2019. So we're kind of hybrid cloud at the moment. We always look at cloud first solutions when we're doing anything new. In terms of what we're looking to migrate over to cloud services, we kind of do a lot anyway. That's kind of with Intune and co-management of devices. We try and push more and more services into the cloud. And the thing that I like about the cloud services isn't necessarily that you're getting it out of your on-premises infrastructure. It's the fact that it's the analytics that you get out of it. So when you look at things like Intune and you're looking at device usage, if you've got optimally running devices and all the data that you get out of the cloud systems, that's what adds the value for us. And we've kind of got the best of both worlds being co-managed, because it doesn't matter if the devices are in the school or at a student's house, we can manage them. We can push services out to them, and we can get some really good data from them as well. So I do think it's coming. I think we move more and more towards a full cloud environment. I think it's just natural progression of IT. But at this point in time, I don't think we're quite there with a lot of the services that we would need. Not without a massive shift in the way that we run traditional infrastructures within schools and businesses.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions they want to open up to the floor? I'll see if anyone else has anything before I continue pile driving questions into people. No? Okay, cool. So I have a question. This is a bit left field, but I'll tell you the premises for where I was thinking when I wrote this question. So obviously, we all know that in education, IT staff are generally underpaid, underfunded, and especially when it comes to replacing staff, you're in a very competitive market because you're going in at the lower end of salary brackets, expecting a gold class engineer, but wanting to pay the peanuts for them. So do you think that those challenges of the skill shortage that there is there anyway in the field and the low pay is going to continue to put pressure onto IT teams as you struggle to recruit? Because obviously, the better you get, the more skills people get, the quicker they move on and go to other jobs. Are you seeing those pressures? Do you think that's something that's going to continue to hurt you? Because something that I know when I was in your roles, it always did hurt me, was trying to replace staff was a nightmare. And I just wondered what your thoughts are as you sit in the market at the moment. Like I see you're itching to go.
I'm itching to answer that question. I think it's a really, really valid point, and I think one of my massive frustrations from joining the education sector right back in 2012-13 is exactly all those things that you've covered. You've got kind of no kind of development of what is a profession, and I think anybody who's still working in IT and education, we're not doing it for the money. There's other things that are motivators for us. But again, going back to the pandemic, I think bringing IT back to the forefront of everybody's mind has actually realised that we do need to start investing in your staff. We have two really great technicians who work for us in the academy, but they've had no investment. They've been with us 2 years. There's no CPD, no professional training. It's all peer-led, mentor-based training. And they're going to get to a point where they'll naturally want to move on out, probably even outside of education, because they're young. There's the draws on, amazing salaries that you can get outside of education. But I do think that things are changing. I think the one good thing to come out of a global pandemic is that IT is kind of back on the roadmap. And I think there's a real appreciation there now that you need skill. I think personally, and I know speaking for my right hand man who's not there at the moment, but we have a real passion for IT. So if we don't know something, the way we learn it is because we want to, but sometimes you're just kind of looking for that investment from an organisation to say, you know what, you do need to go and do your professional courses. And, you know, obviously that's where it helps as well when we have great partnerships with people who we work with, and where we can draw on professional services.
Fill the gaps in, yeah. Dave, how about from your experience? You're on mute.
Don't you completely understand? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my best. That was my best. No, it reminds me of the meme of what if we train them up and they leave, but what if we don't train them up and they stay? That's the problem. You could end up with a completely underskilled team that we're in public sector, we've got our feet under the table, it doesn't really matter. But that's the problem. That's not what you need to drive technology forward, to help your organisation be that school of excellence, which we all strive for. How are you going to get there if you don't have the skill to get you there? What I found, which I was very grateful for at Harlow College, is they very much invest in the technology, because they know that without it, that whole learning piece starts to fall apart. They're underprepared for what's coming. I kind of brings to light one education establishment that we both know recently, James. They didn't spend money on their staff, so therefore the skill wasn't there. So when a certain problem came up, they had to outsource a lot of the IT to the private sector to help them out. And that's the problem we're going to find as departments, as IT, as your C Club start turning around going, we've got to start driving this, and we haven't got the team or the skill to do it. You also haven't got the time to train them up. When you've got that pressure from the C Club to move things forward, you can't go, yeah, we'll do it in a year's time once we get everyone on the training courses. That's too late. Yeah. So yeah, I see that there is a problem in education with getting people to that point now.
Definitely.
Yeah, a little bit just to add to that, which is really interesting. I mean, a few years ago, our bursar, he said, Graham, I want you to come up to the ISBA conference with me this year. There's a big part on like cyber security, etc., etc. I'd like you to be there to help with questions, etc., etc. But there was one particular piece that I didn't know was going to happen, but I loved it, because this is something I have fought until I am blue in the face for, and it's as along the likes of proper training. And yes, all the challenges, like you were saying there, you invest all of this and then somebody leaves. I think all that side of things is a bit of a risk. But just quickly going back to this conference and this piece, the guy that I never remember his name stood up, and what he emphasised on was whatever your IT budget is, a minimum of 20% of that budget should be assigned to training, both the technical side as well as the teaching side that are using all of those technologies. And honestly, I have been fighting that like you wouldn't believe, and we have fallen so far short of it. And we certainly had our challenges when the pandemic hit. Yeah, it highlighted that more than ever. It was challenging. I actually was glad that it did, because I felt that actually helped my cause. What I've been saying, from the technical side of things, I keep putting in all of this like latest technology into the school, but then people can't use it properly.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, there is an investment that should be there, but it's hard to get it.
100%. Mr. Patrick, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to back up Graham on that one. I can remember the guy who stood up. He was a bursar, which is why it was quite ironic he was talking about spending money. So I think he'd just gone through a big project. I think it may have been St Helens and St Catherine's, which is a school close to us and to you in Abingdon, James.
Yeah.
I think it was he spoke up and said, look, we spent all this money, but whatever you spend, you've got to spend this much on training. And we have exactly the same problem. I'm 13 days away from getting my first ICT technician. I couldn't be happier, but he's not attached to any apprenticeship program. So I'm already looking, well, what training have I got to do and what time have I got as an already busy person to pass this on to him? So we're actually looking at queuing courses on an online platform like Udemy at him.
Yeah.
So he spends a day or an hour a day doing these courses that we think are, and I'm going to try and highlight skill sets that we don't have on site at the moment, and try and plug holes with this new young guy who is he's like a sponge. He's just going to absorb all of this quite quickly.
And uplift him as you go.
Yeah, and we went on then to talk to Udemy about having a site-wide training platform, so that all this investment we're going to be putting into IT, we can see a return on that because we're training people to use it. And this guy from Udemy came back with $300 per user per year. So you're looking at 100 staff, you're looking at £30,000 a year just for a training package.
Yeah.
And that's where it always falls over in education, I think, is the lack of training to use, like Graham says, this new technology, Microsoft Teams. You know, the teachers used it to teach, but are they using it to the best of their abilities? I don't think so.
No. I definitely appreciate that comment. I think, you know, that's where, from our point of view, we've tried to take vendor training and repackage it and offer it to our customers at a lower cost, especially in education, because we know if you want to go get yourself a VCP from VMware, you're looking at a few £1,000s. But actually, in education, what you care about is how to deliver that solution and how to operate it. You don't care about all the fancy stuff which they want to tell you about, all the things you can sell which you're never going to use. So that's what we try and do, is that fine balance. And that's why I asked it, because I think we see there's a skills shortage out there. You know, we're always recruiting, and we see that there's certainly a lack of skilled people, even at a high budget. So I can't only imagine the pressures are so much worse. And I think, you know, what Mike was saying about the pandemic and putting a focus on it, I think so many organisations went, oh hell, we need IT. Let's pull more people in. It's meant the market's now essentially non-existent unless you want to throw, you know, £200,000 at someone for a day's work. So no, it's just an interesting point I wanted to raise. I've just seen the time, so actually I think we are actually running out of time, so I shall move to wrap this up. Yeah, I am sorry to say that we're out of time now. We're a little bit over. First thing all I'd like to do is thank everyone for joining in the conversation. The conversation will continue on our social media platforms. So we're using the hashtag PlanetITEdu 2021. You will have seen it on our LinkedIn post. If you tag that into anything, either of the panelists that are here or one of our IT experts will jump on and help answer your questions and move things forward. I mean, obviously, we're here to help at the end of the day. But now I'd like to thank, obviously, Dave Higgs, Mike Pearce, Graham Rivers for being with us and giving up your time to do this today. It's really appreciated. And also the team at Planet as well that's made this possible for me to be here today and made everything work, and Barry, and getting it all set up. I hope you found this event to be useful and you found something in it that you can take away and think about. If you do want to reach out to me directly following this, then I'm just going to throw my contact details up on the screen so you can reach out to me. I'll wait for that to load. So if you want to reach out to me, there's my email address, there's my number. Feel free to reach out. I'm always there to help you with the hashtag in the corner as well. For those of you who have been following our monthly events, the next one of our events is on the last Thursday of the month, so Thursday the 24th of June at 2 p.m. And the next event is on shifting from the data center to the cloud with Microsoft Azure. So a nice cloud-focused hybrid approach, maybe, for people we can talk about. You can sign up today via our LinkedIn page. There's an event on there now. You can sign up, or you can reach out to your Planet IT account manager and they'll hook you up. Outside of that, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have enjoyed this. And I hope that you can join us on our next event, and hopefully the next education roundtable we do will be in a nice hotel somewhere with plenty of coffee. Cheers. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, guys.